And good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for joining with us and coming back again. As I say, this is our 10th webinar. Where have the months flown to? But it's good that we are coming towards the end of this year. I'm sure we'll all want to see the back of this year. But I'm delighted in this first session this afternoon, Rally, to be with Claire and to Lynn. No, both of them I know are known to many of you within the visitor economy. But if I could particularly turn to you, first of all, Lynn, you head the film office in Liverpool. That's obviously a very big job, we know that. But I'm just wondering, for those who don't really understand, what does the film office do and what is the importance of the film office to Liverpool?
The film office is part of Liverpool City Council. I think some people aren't really aware of that. I'm part of Claire's brilliant, diverse and unique team. The film office was set up as a purely economic initiative. It was about attracting film and TV production to Liverpool in order to not only show the marvellous locations that we have here, but to make a positive impact on the local economy in terms of production spend. And over the years, we've been able to introduce the film and TV industry to a range of local talent, local suppliers, local facilities that have developed over time as a result of the regular business that we've been able to attract. More recently, with support from the Combined Authority, the film office's role is now more of a hybrid from a traditional film office, which is very much about locations and logistics of filming and closing roads and things like that. But it's more now a kind of more strategic role around investment into infrastructure and training and skills in order to build a more diverse and more inclusive crew base, but also to kind of change that perception of production only come in and film for a few weeks or a few months and then disappear. This is about building a really strong, vibrant Indigenous production sector, whilst unlocking those opportunities for local people to sustain a really interesting and rewarding career within the film and TV sector. The film and TV sector was quick out the blocks after COVID, and we've got a fantastic slate of production between now and March, with a lot more planned in the new year. So, the role of the film office is, it puts Liverpool not only in front of the camera, but also behind.
Thanks, Lynn. And just in terms of numbers, what does it mean for the economy of Liverpool, the film office?
Film office attracts about £20 million a year from production spend into the local economy, and that's across a huge array of local businesses and suppliers. The immediate beneficiaries is the hospitality sector, hotels and restaurants, and the nighttime economy in Liverpool, but also taxi companies, florists, security, car hire. The list of suppliers that film and TV need is amazing. Just take that shop behind you, Bill. That kind of infrastructure just doesn't rock up. There's a lot of planning that goes into that, and my job and my team's job is to ensure that production companies filming in Liverpool are aware of those local services and local suppliers.
And of course, the roles for extras as well in Liverpool, because we all like to be in front of a camera, don't we?
I speak for yourself. I hate it. But yeah, there's we've had many different projects where they've employed lots and lots of local people, as I said, as extras, but also more interestingly, more from my point of view, in a more rewarding manner, in roles behind the camera as well.
Yeah. And what has COVID meant for our film production? We were talking just before about obviously films that were under production as COVID hit in March.
Yes, we had, we last year, or we were celebrating our 30th anniversary with 2020 looking like it was going to be our best year ever. We had £100 million worth of production confirmed from January through to December, and it all collapsed literally overnight. 13th of March, I'll never forget it. It was Warner Brothers was in the city with Batman, and just when international flights to America started being pulled, it was at that point that the studio made a decision to reschedule to later on in the year. And it was a brilliant testament to Warner Brothers and my colleagues in the city. You know, Matt Ashton, you know, was incredibly busy at the time, but he spent a lot of time with my team and Warner Brothers, making sure that the production went well, but also safely. So, you know, that is the biggest compliment we could have had, that Warner Brothers, even when Liverpool was in tier 3, trusted the city enough and knew that we would, you know, we were incredibly professional in our support of that production. It's the biggest movie being currently made in the world, and Liverpool doubled as Gotham. And there's a number of currently there's a possibility of Batman 2, Batman 3, so fingers crossed. But not only Batman came out the blocks quickly, but me and my team, we were very proud to be part of government working with the British Film Commission to produce UK guidelines and standards for a quick return and safe return to production by the film and TV industry. And those guidelines, you know, meant that film and TV production was quick out the blocks in June, as well as £500 million insurance scheme underwritten by government to ensure that those shows continued. And I think that's a testament from government that they see the film and TV sector as one of the growth sectors, and a sector that is vital to the continued success of UK PLC, particularly with the American market. You know, where this is a focus on the high-end streamers, you know, the Netflix shows, Sky, Apple, and you know, Brexit will open those doors even further for that particular sector.
So that's a clear example again of Liverpool leading the way in the UK and internationally, is that right?
Absolutely. We've just been nominated for our first industry award after 30 years. I didn't have to wait long. And again, I'm really proud of the team's efforts, particularly during the lockdown. We kept our office open. We kept in touch with all our clients, giving them the reassurance and the confidence that they needed, that, you know, the city was open for business again, but also keeping them abreast of industry guidelines and changes that were happening on a daily basis. And so, yeah, you know, it's been a really interesting and challenging time. But for industry to recognise our achievements during that time, you know, we're shortlisted with 5 film commissions from across the world, you know, and Liverpool is the only UK office in there. So big shout out to the team and a big well done. And I think it's also, you know, an acknowledgement of the City Council support and the CA for the work that we're doing. And the role, that's the changing role that the Film Office is morphing into. You know, we were quick to repurpose some of our production fund money into a development fund, particularly to help local talent and local producers during the lockdown. And that's paid dividends in terms of some really exciting, innovative work that will be developed further down the line. So it's this continuous production line, really. You know, we finally got that right now. You know, so it's not gaps between one production. You know, there's like buses now. You'll get 3 or 4 at the same time. So and that's brilliant, because it means then that there's you know, local crew can sustain work locally. They don't have to move. And I think, again, that's really important in these new ways of working that we're all going to have to get used to for a while. Production will become much more localized. While Batman brought everything with them, they had to because of the new COVID guidelines. The shift is changing more towards picking up talent and picking up services more locally, so that there isn't that transition, that movement of people.
Yeah. We're about to see Liverpool again headlining, aren't we, with the new Sky production that's coming, Tin Star 3, which is
it's actually called Tin Star Liverpool, which is incredible.
Just tell us the story about why did they suddenly change from where they were in Canada to come to Liverpool? Is that because Tim Roth loves Liverpool, or?
Yeah, basically. Often, you don't get talent that makes that decision. It's usually the producers, the accountants, make decisions on production these days. And without trying not to give any spoilers away, the series was supposed to finish, and apparently, there is a kind of a connection to Liverpool, kind of running at a fairly subdued level throughout the project. And Tim said, the third one, we're going to Liverpool. He loves the city, really enjoyed filming here, and so much so that who knows, there might be another one on the cards. But yeah, that comes out in December. It has a huge international following, particularly in the States. It's really, really popular. Liverpool, unusually and brilliantly, is being filmed as Liverpool. And it's not just Liverpool City, it's the city region that features in it. And it looks absolutely stunning, from the beaches right across the city region. It's a brilliant shoot, and again, one that the city should be really proud of.
I've seen the trailers on YouTube. It looks some great shots of New Brighton and the Wirral and the whole of the city region, which is brilliant. It's great. Yeah. Just before I bring Claire into the conversation, and we'll start talking about what 21 will look like. But obviously, I mean, the Film Office we know it's about the sets, it's about using Liverpool as a backdrop, but actually it's going to be more, film is going to be more in Liverpool, isn't it? With the studios on Edge Lane, the pop-up studios, the skills base, there's a whole industry building now behind film in Liverpool. And Liverpool will become the UK headquarters, the Ealing Studios, for those who remember the comedies of the days and the Pinewood. Liverpool will really become the studio centre, the production centre as well for the UK.
It will, again, we've been quite ahead of the curve, always with the film and TV sector, always seeing that explosion, opportunity in terms of production, and the only way you begin to invest in your infrastructure and to embed, opportunities for local people is to invest in dedicated sound and post-production facilities. Littlewoods as a project has been on the cards for a while, and it was as a result of me constantly complaining and banging the drum to keep more business in the city rather than lose it down the motorway, because the clients wanted to stay here, but there wasn't those types of facilities. I think I had Joe once kind of say, I can't believe there's no big warehouses, and I'm like, no, there's not. So that was at a time when the economy was developing at a far greater rate, and so there wasn't those types of facilities. So part of colleagues worked really incredibly hard during lockdown, and quite a brilliant application to government for the city's economic recovery, which included public funding for Littlewoods to get the scheme moving, but also contained within that a short-term solution, which is these 2 temporary pop-up stages that are adjacent to Littlewoods on land owned by the council, and these facilities will be managed by me and my team. That means, again, the client will have a really comprehensive offer from the city through the Film Office in terms of locations, crew, facilities, but also now studio space. It means they can stay longer, you know, and appealing to the streamers. You know, Netflix are now in a position where they're commissioning projects on a returning basis, usually 3 to 5 years. You know, that again, that's Still Behind You is one of their shows, which is going to be in Liverpool for 5 years, which is The Irregulars. So that type of investment is incredible. And Netflix also worked with us to pilot a scheme to take 5 new entrants into production from you know, economically challenging backgrounds, where those opportunities would potentially be a challenge, and it will fast track them on that project over 5 years. So they will change the lives of 5 young people from LMA, Liverpool Media Academy. And that's fantastic. You know, if we can start doing that with other shows, that would be absolutely brilliant. But yeah, you know, 2021 for me is about focusing on infrastructure and then linking the talent pipelines to that, again, across the city region. So working with training providers, working with local industry to see where we can create those opportunities for freelancers, helping upskill women returning back to the sector, you know, from having families, but also, you know, people who would normally find avenues and entry ways into the film and TV industry a challenge. You know, they're kind of the priorities for us for next year, and also film tourism. You know, Chris and I are completely aware of the opportunities the city has with a huge show like Batman and Tin Star, you know, and this is where, again, the work of the Film Office can impact positively on the local hospitality sector around staycations, you know, attracting new visitors to the city for something different, you know, a movie trail, being able to see where Batman, you know, was dangling from a helicopter over the Liver building and so on, which, you know, it can be indoor, outdoor, but you know, done in a really COVID secure way. And we'd also like to introduce a Film Office loyalty card, again, working with businesses, you know, with the bid to get our clients, you know, to enjoy the hospitality sector, you know, the great nightlife that Liverpool has to offer.
That's great. Thanks, Lynn. So anybody is looking for a job as an extra, then we know where to come to, Lynn. And thanks. Don't forget that we have our Q&A. We also have the chat function if anybody wants to ask specific questions. But Claire McColgan. So Lynn was just saying that the Film Office is part of Culture Liverpool. And so the work that you've been doing, we know all about that. But really now you're heading up also the recovery for the city and the city centre, aren't you, particularly of how we can come back, bouncing back in 21.
Yeah, I mean, just to say about Lynn, you know, nobody's in charge of Lynn Saunders. She's an absolute force of nature, and we're really, really, really lucky to have her. It's very rare in cities you get someone with that specialist knowledge and that absolute passion that has driven her over the last 30 years. And you see that, you know, you see it with the relationships that she's built with Warner's, with all the kind of, you know, with all the kind of film companies that come in, and no other city's got that. So I'm absolutely thrilled that she's here, but I absolutely take no responsibility or credit for anything she's ever done, because she's just amazing. We're really, really, really lucky to have her. So I just want to say that first. And then just to move on to the recovery, yes, you know, we've had 2 recoveries, haven't we? You know, I think the last time I spoke to this panel was when we were coming out, or even just going into the first lockdown. It seems like a very long time ago now. And we invented Without Walls, which was a very, very quick scheme to get tables and chairs, basically to get to shut 2 major streets in the city centre, but to enable restaurants to buy tables and chairs. This was in the before kind of Eat Out to Help Out started. So the 2 kind of initiatives combined really enabled our restaurants and our bars to do really, really well from Eat Out to Help Out. So there was that double whammy for them that I hope will have given them some sustenance over these times since we went into lockdown for the second time. Well, since we went into tier 2 and tier 3, really. the reboot of the city centre I think will be different this time, because hopefully, you know, and we're still waiting to hear, you know, we're coming out of lockdown on the 2nd of December, straight into the Christmas period. Paul and others, and those of you on the call, will know how important that is to the hospitality sector, but also the cultural sector, who are still rehearsing pantomimes, who are still rehearsing concerts during lockdown, who are ready to go if we get the okay to go on the 2nd of December. But I think for me, the bit that we're starting to look at now is a slightly longer term recovery, because I said when we first went into lockdown, and we did without walls, it was a sticking plaster. You know, it couldn't be any more than that, because as a city and as a country, really, we need a long-term plan for hospitality. And Kate, who's doing a brilliant job, is on the call later, and we'll probably have some answers to this. But we need a long-term plan for kind of recognising the importance of the hospitality sector, because it's something we've always had, and as a city we've really enjoyed. But we've gone from a very small hospitality sector 10 years ago to it being, you know, 48% of our business rates in the last 10 years. So it's hugely important to places like Liverpool, to places that rely on that, you know, that vibrancy of nightlife, of vibrancy of daytime tourism coming in, and we just want to get back to that. And I think probably everybody on this call and all the people who are listening, you know, we want a sense of normality back, and we want this city to go back to what it was this time last year. But I think it will be a slow return this time. Vaccine is great hope, isn't it? You know, and mass testing. You know, this city, I know we'll touch on that a bit later, but you know, nowhere else would have come out in their thousands like they have done here for mass testing. And that's because we want to get back, you know, as a city and as a region, we want to get back to where we were. And that passion and that kind of absolute drive from Liverpool is kind of what will get us through this, I think.
So next year, 21, we had 2018, didn't we? The celebration of 10 years of post-capital culture. We're going to see something similar in 21 as soon as we can open back up again.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when we did the 10 years since European Capital of Culture, we invested quite a significant amount of resources, but we got it all back because we attracted huge amounts more numbers of people in hotels, in restaurants. People remember the Terracotta Warrior exhibition at the museum did exceptionally well for us as a city and a region. The Giants coming back, the Ugo Rodinelli piece that is now a symbol of the city's renaissance outside the Albert Dock. So, and a huge city collective programme, really. And I think that's what we need to look at for next year, and what we're starting to plan, and what we're kind of loosely terming the comeback, which is how you create a programme that starts to, first of all, get people back and feeling confident about coming back into the city centre, because that's a big thing. You know, a big thing is for us to regain, especially older people and people who've been shielded, confidence to come back into this incredible city centre. But then from that, how do we start creating programmes, working with our cultural organisations, bringing some great work in to start bringing people back in kind of numbers, but really importantly, in a COVID safe way, because you know, we've got to prepare now for working under COVID, I think. And I think that's the way forward. And we've got loads of ideas on that, and loads of kind of really exciting stuff happening with our partners on what potentially that may be. But I think we need to prepare for working under COVID for a long time. And hopefully there'll be a vaccine and we don't need to do that, and we can just kind of go back. But at the moment, I think we need to prepare to kind of bring the city back in, but under COVID guidelines.
Claire, just we've been asked a specific question about the future of Bold Street, and indeed the reciprocal of that is the future of Castle Street as well. You and I have spoken in depth about what's potentially could happen with Bold Street. From the council's point of view, what is the current position with Bold Street? What's the potential?
I think the current position, we've just done a survey, so we surveyed the businesses on Bold Street and on Castle Street around the Without Walls initiative, and you know, the feedback has been universally positive about it. It's been great. So what we'd like to do, it's a temporary solution, the kind of the kind of traffic management part of Bold Street and of Castle Street. So it's about keeping that kind of better. So keeping that going, but also potentially changing it to slightly semi-permanent, so we can do some more beautiful dressing of it, because we did it very quickly, you'll remember. So the parklets on Bold Street look fantastic, but I'd really like to look at the dressing of it and make sure it looks absolutely fantastic for next year. But also so we trialled a few things during post-lockdown around bringing markets into the city centre and looking at kind of outdoor craft markets and starting to kind of think about how we can create footfall. And they're all the sort of things we'll be looking at, as well as, again, thinking about how we can work, especially with artists, to create real identities around those streets so that when you come in, you automatically know you're on a real kind of bohemian, fantastic restauranted street. And then also working with some of the other streets in the city centre. So looking at Hope Street, we've got Christmas lights going up for the first time in Hope Street this year, and looking at that particularly, I think, for next year, and Hope Street, kind of Hardman Street area as well, which is another part of the city that I think needs some attention. But I think what's been really good for me, you know, usually our head is in normal years is it's event after event after event, it's supporting the cultural sector, it's all the things we do under Culture Liverpool, it's the cruise liners coming in, you know, it's hugely busy. Whereas what lockdown has given us the opportunity to do, I think, is really start to look at the city centre and start to look at how it feels and how we can kind of make that feel better and look better. And we've got some really exciting plans for that.
Excellent. Yeah, well, I look forward to hearing that, and I'm sure our audience today is also very keen to hear that. So please do keep chat coming in, keep your questions coming in. And Chris, if I could hand across to you and welcome Kate. I know you've had a busy morning, and I'm sure, bless you, Chris will be able to find out what you've been up to.
Okay,
Thanks.
you. Yeah, thanks very much, Bill. And yeah, just a big shout out, Lynn, from I think from the hotel sector, and I think that Warner Brothers production, you know, saved the bacon of a lot of our hotels during the summer. So thanks so much for that, and just the pressure on now to keep it going. Yeah. And also, just before I introduce Kate, it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge and thank you for all the great work you've been doing for the hospitality sector ever since lockdown, and the voice you provided for the sector. And hopefully in doing that, government have began to realise what a prized asset they've got in this sector, and maybe that might stand us in good stead going forward. But in order just to get this conversation moving, obviously we're in lockdown at the moment, and we hope you know, to come out of that on the 2nd of December into the 3rd, obviously. I mean, I'm just interested in your views and the hospitality sector's views around your kind of thinking about what that lockdown coming out of that looks like compared to when we went into it. We obviously had the tier system. We'd started to get the rule of 6. We'd had the tiers. We were in tier 3, which we knew would cause a lot of problems. What's your hopes and expectations that when we come out of this, what are we going to come out looking like, and what would you like us to come out looking like?
Well, I think my big ambition is to make sure we do come out of it, because I think it's a very sort of politically appealing argument to be able to say we've come out of national lockdown, but we've left hospitality or parts of hospitality shut fully. And so, you know, if we're talking about priorities, my first priority is that we do come out of national lockdown. We do not have national regulations that require pubs, bars, restaurants to be closed nationally. And I think then secondary to that is exit through the tier system. What does that tier system look like? Is there scope to adjust it? And can we make it that it delivers the same public health objectives? Because we all understand the needs to be able to get the disease under control. We see the devastating impact it has on cities like Liverpool, where you can't do that and you're forced into tier 3. So yes, we need to adjust it, but we need to be pragmatic and sensible about that. And then I think third priority as we're doing that is to make sure that any changes we make to the tier system, if they are small, and my gut feeling is that will be what will happen, the tier system will not be dismantled, it will be retained, and it'll be small adjustments. Make sure that those adjustments are only in place for the 28 days following the 3rd of December. So the government is now in a 28-day review cycle, and we need to sort of make sure that we are talking about restrictions that might be necessary to get as much of the economy and all of hospitality open in the run up to Christmas. And then we look again afresh at this from January to March, because I can understand entirely why having been in very strict lockdown, having many parts of the Northwest and the Northeast in tier 2 and tier 3 restrictions for a long period of time, there will be a reticence about lifting the restrictions too quickly and too fully, and having an explosion over Christmas of cases, etc. again, and just going back into third lockdown. So I think it's that sort of stepped approach, gradual incremental change. So, clear message to government. If you want people to have a safe, sociable Christmas and to socialise with their family and friends, even for a limited amount of extent, the best way to do that and the way to keep people safer is to reopen hospitality. It has to be safer to allow hospitality to reopen with controls and allow people to stay and visit their family in a hotel that's COVID secure, go and eat in a restaurant, or have their Christmas where they're mixing as a household in a restaurant or a pub, than going and staying with granny and having 4 families in a 2-bedroom house, which is what lots of people will still be doing. I think being pragmatic, if you want to socialize safely over Christmas and allow people to meet family and friends, encourage them to do it in a COVID secure, responsible hospitality venue where they can be managed, social distancing can be maintained and enforced, and also we can make sure we've got good hygiene and sanitation. If we're then looking at what we might be able to adjust in the tier system, it's clear that in the tier system, the biggest impact that was had for moving into tier 2 and also tier 3 going forward is that the ban on mixed household socialising. That was what had the most significant impact on revenues as you moved up the tiers. And actually the curfew, if you removed just the curfew and left no mixed households ban, I don't think it takes many of our operators further forward. So it's about looking at those trade-offs that might be made. If we could have some limited mixed household socialising, I think an awful lot of operators in tier 3 and tier 2 would be willing to accept that there were some additional restrictions on their business in order to get that open. And I think that that's where we need to enter into dialogue. And then a final point before I stop is that we not only need to know what the restrictions are, we need to know where the tiers are in advance of 3rd of December. And we need to have an early indication of which parts of the country will be in which tiers. And I think from a Liverpool perspective in particular, we really need to know what are the criteria and metrics that mean you move up a tier and crucially move down a tier, because that process at the moment, as far as I can see, is opaque. And that makes it very difficult to get business support and business buy-in for it, because they don't know what they're committing to and they don't know what they're being judged against. So I think we need to make sure that we're looking as much as possible, if we can, to take Liverpool out of tier 3 and move them down, or give people a signal of what would be necessary to move Liverpool down and make that tier system work in Liverpool. And then a final point is, if we have got the same restrictions over that busy Christmas trading period, given that for many of our operators, it's 20 to 50% of their profits are earned in December. If we cannot get those businesses open and we cannot get a change on those tier restrictions, they need more help than the government has currently given them, particularly with the removal of the CGRS job retention bonus that was coming in February, which was going to fund recovery for most people in the sector. That was a lifeline that looked at taking them further forward into that longer term recovery that Claire was just talking about.
Yeah, I mean, some great points there, Kate. I think certainly, from a Liverpool perspective, that is clearly the big issue, is about the roadmap coming out and how we come out. And us going back into tier 3 isn't success. That's for surety. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I just hope the government recognise the need to make their decisions early and not come to us on the 2nd of December and say this is what you can do for the 3rd. I really hope that doesn't happen. But I mean, throughout this whole process and the work you've been leading on at a national level, I mean, do you sense that government have started to get a better understanding of the whole ecosystem, how interconnected all these things are between culture and events and hospitality and tourism? And in doing that, do you think that we'll come out of this with a government with a refreshed approach about the sector, the understanding of the importance of it and what it contributes to UK PLC, and films a clear part of that, as we were just hearing earlier from Lynn? What do you think the legacy of this is all going to be in terms of the government's attitude and support for the sector going forward, which to date, pre-COVID wasn't great?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, pre-COVID, we've all been a bit of a Cinderella and Cinderella industry and not really appreciated at a national government level, and certainly not appreciated and understood for our regeneration role. If I go back to the sort of early part of your question, I don't think they fully grasp how interconnected we are. I think that there is quite a good understanding around events, functions, culture, and tourism. And then I think there is a good understanding around hospitality. And I don't think they necessarily see the two intersecting to the extent that they are, or if they do, it's in very localized areas. So, you know, the MPs, the Minister for London, the Mayor of London, I think totally gets it. Liverpool, Manchester, but across the national grid, I don't think that they see that necessarily as being so totally interconnected. And there is still this discrepancy within government that you've got a sort of tourism and events sit over here and high street hospitality sits over here. And that's the bit that we need to work on over the next 2 to 3 months. I mean, it's great that we've now, for the first time, got to focus on high street hospitality, and the importance and the understanding of hospitality has shot up the political agenda, the number employed, etc. That crossover, no, not quite. And I think, again, the sort of tourism, they see and understand it as an export earner, international tourists. They don't tend to see it as the day trippers, the domestic tourism, the people who are coming in from the sort of wider Merseyside region into the heart of Liverpool to go and view those exhibitions, to go and visit the restaurants, to etc. I don't think they see that as being such a fragile ecosystem. And you can see that by the fact that they leave bits closed. You know, if they did see us as an integrated whole, if they understood truly the holistic nature of it, they wouldn't have this bizarre situation where you've got nightclubs and events and conferences just out in the ether with no date and no reopening. You know, the idea that you can restart restaurants and pubs without having commuters coming back in, without having events and functions, without having culture, I don't think they fully get. But the legacy, I think, is there for us to build on, that for the first time, they see us as an important part of the economy, as part of the industrial strategy, the recognition of the size, scale and importance. And, you know, every time the GDP figures are released, today's GDP figures came out, we had 1% growth in September as we went back into restrictions, and you saw Manchester and Liverpool and Newcastle and, you know, the Birmingham all starting to shut down and go into restrictions. We delivered 2% growth in August. That was with hospitality, and all of that came through hospitality. So I think you can see that every time the GDP figures come out, they're going to be catastrophic for October, November when we're fully closed. So, you know, the legacy is there to build on. There's much more to do. We need to highlight and draw out those golden threads and make that much more apparent. And we need to work collectively. Hospitality, tourism, events, we need to come together under one umbrella.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been a bit bemused by Treasury's view about domestic tourism. I've never quite understood it about their displacement argument forever and a day. If that changes, that would be great. But I think just before I come on to Paul to get a local perspective of what we're talking about, I mean, in terms of the future, Kate, I mean, we've had you know, the relief around VAT, which I know is something that UK hospitality have talked about for a long time in terms of reduction of VAT. What kind of long-term measures would you'd like to see continued like that, or any other support measures? And dare I mention it, you know, what's your views around what you think the impacts of Brexit are going to be on the sector? Not to add more doom and gloom to the conversation, of course.
To be honest, at this point, Brexit is light relief from COVID and from how dismal it is talking about COVID. I did say that to somebody in the department, the trade department, yesterday when we were talking about international trade, which is the first time anybody said Brexit or trade policy is light relief. In terms of longer term, all of the package of measures, and it was unprecedented and it was fantastic, all of the package of measures that the government did got us to what they thought was going to be the recovery stage, which was from August. We were on an upward trajectory and we were going to be into recovery in H1 of next year. It's quite clear that that recovery is pushed back until April, May, earliest next year. And our members are telling us that they don't get back into profitability until the end of next year. The hoteliers are telling us it's 2023 before they start to get into recovery of pre-COVID. So I think we need to urgently have a longer term strategic perspective from the government. There is nothing beyond March. And that to me, they start talking about short, medium and long term, and they're putting April as long term. To me, that's nonsense. So we need to start looking now at a strategic review. We need the support for the recovery. VAT cuts are great, but they only help if you're trading and open. So for most of the time that we've benefited from the VAT cut, we've been closed. So I do think you need that extended for the whole of next year. And the other issue that we've got is business rates. I think Claire talked about how important hospitality business rates are to many parts. That's not necessarily just because of the growth of hospitality. It's also the fact that not everybody else is paying their fair share. We're overpaying, and it's going to cripple us if we go back into business rates in April. So those are the two sort of fiscal measures. Longer term strategy, I think you need to take this opportunity to review and build back better. So we need reform of landlord and tenant, and we need an urgent look at the rent situation. We do need to look at structural reform of business rates. We need to look at planning and how we can incentivize planning use, given that we've got changes in our town and city centres that are long term as a result of COVID. And we also urgently need the tourism department and DCMS to look at how you support the industry and resolve these issues about domestic versus international, how we can maximise the domestic opportunity, but also how we look at funding destination marketing and destination management, and how we look at competing internationally. You know, all of our international competitors are out there already getting people back to their towns and cities, getting them back to their country, and we are behind the curve on that. And I do think that needs a review and revision.
Okay, so that's a fair amount on the to-do list there, Kate, I can tell, yeah. But listen, thanks very much for some great insights as ever, Kate. Thank you very much. And then Paul, turning to yourself, first and foremost, congratulations on your recent and latest award at the Tourism Awards the other night. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Just, you know, really, Paul, getting your local take on this, really, in terms of the context of that national perspective that Kate has outlined. I mean, how do you see it from a restaurant perspective? And of course, also you act on behalf and work very closely with a number of the guys in the sector as well. What's your particularly around this reopening? Yeah?
I mean, I think, you know, it mirrors pretty well everything that Kate has just mentioned. I think the challenges for Liverpool are very similar to a number of northern cities that have been mentioned, but we have significant difference in that because of our, you know, the way we were positioned as being first into tier 3, you know, 2 weeks in, our cases had halved just by being in tier 3. And it was very frustrating, and that's being very diplomatic in my language, that we were straight into a national lockdown just as it seemed that the tier 3 restrictions were actually working for us. And, you know, a lot of people across the country have invested so heavily in getting COVID compliance and being gold standard and going above and beyond. I think that was a frustration for a lot of our members in Liverpool hospitality, in terms of, you know, we're trying to set this amazing standard, and we're the first in tier 3, and we were determined to be the first coming out. And then, of course, the doom and gloom descended even further. So what I would like to see is that if we were the first into tier 3, and obviously maybe ahead of the curve in terms of the national picture with lockdown now, that there should be some incentives for that coming out. And Kate touched on that when she talked about what is the mechanism that gets us out into a different tier. You know, I'd love to see us coming out in tier 2 or even tier 1. And if the mass testing that's going on in the city, you know, we've been the first to put our hands up and say, yeah, we'll do it. We'll get this going. You know, we'll be at the front line of the recovery. That there should be some incentives and some carrots there for us to come out of it as a national example of what recovery could be, and how brave and you know, how progressive we've been in terms of leadership to do that. I think that's massively important. And I have to take my hat off to the, you know, the local government, because the way that the city has worked with central government has been a real game changer for me. And it's long overdue that this city was looked on in a different way than it has been historically, in terms of recovery, in terms of investment, in terms of our collaboration. And it was great to hear Lynn talk about the successes with the Film Office and how central government had seen the benefit of that. And really, it kind of feeds into exactly what Claire was saying as well. You know, the culture is the rocket fuel of this city. And since the regeneration in 2008 and beyond, well, it started before 2008, as most of us know, but you have seen the absolute meteoric rise of hospitality, of visitor economy, of the, you know, the film office, you know, and we are an event-led city which attracts so many tourists, and you know, this whole ecosystem thing has got to start to click with them. And this is what I'm talking about when I say give us some carrots. Maybe use the testing to get us into some venues, maybe use the testing to allow some people into football stadiums, to allow people in conferences at ACC Liverpool, to allow them to come and be tested on the doorstep of the art school and have a 20-minute, you know, peak flow test. And if you pass, you're in. If you're not, then sorry, you've got to go and isolate. I think that's where Liverpudlians and restaurateurs and hospitality workers want to see. They want to see that all this hard graft is going to produce a quicker exit, you know.
Yeah, but and some great points there, Paul. I mean, I think also the other thing I think I've been really impressed with you guys is that you've pivoted and changed your business models. You've done a lot of the article, I know, with your boxes, and I think it showed the great adaptability and flexibility of the sector to look at diversifying. Are there elements of that you've done and learned from that you'll actually say, you know what, you know, we're going to keep that now? That's something, a new initiative we tried because we were shut, but actually it's now going to be part of our business mix going forward. Is that something you're looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when these things happen, you know, we're a creative industry, and you sit down and you innovate and you sort of strip things back and maybe go back to basics in a way. And if I'm honest, the one great thing that has come out of this is that we've all taken a step back, looked at our businesses, and unfortunately, obviously, when recession hits, somebody said to me once, you know, it teaches you how you should have been running your business all along. And there is an element of that. I have to say, there is an element of that. And our you know, art school at home, or the emporium, the click and collect, the delivery, the wine, the cheese, the charcuterie, all of the things that we've sort of moved to the front of the queue now because we've had to, is actually been a revelation to me. And I can't see ever not doing those now in a bizarre way. It seems quite strange that has created a new section of the market. It'll never replace what we do in the restaurants or in the event spaces of the restaurants. But you know, it is something that's kept the brand alive. It's kept the interest in the art school. It's kept us sane. It's kept the creative juices flowing in the kitchen. And you know, it's been a real challenge for everybody. But it's allowed me not to make redundancy, which I think was the huge challenge for all of us. You know, this is a people business, and we had to keep our teams together. And I feel so bad for the guys who have had to make redundancy so far. And I just hopping on to what Kate was saying about moving forward in terms of the package. You know, the VAT, as you quite rightly say, it's only beneficial when we're open. So, but if we are open, that has to remain in place for at least another 12 months, I would say. And the same with business rates. And I would also love to see, you know, a stronger move against the position of the insurance companies. I say it every time. You know, if the insurance companies were held to rights about what they should have paid and could have paid, we wouldn't be going back to Mr. Sunak and saying, where's the blooming furlough? Where's this? Because we would have had the money. It's absolutely insane to me that this hasn't been addressed earlier in a much stronger way.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. Okay, Bill, I'll hand back to you for questions, but you know, great to know that at a national level and a local level, our hospitality sector is so well represented. So thanks very much again, Paul, for your input. Bill, back to you. I know we've got a number of questions there. We'll have obviously got time to run through.
Thanks for that, Chris, and thank you, Kate and Paul, as ever, for your contributions. We've had a number of questions, and if I could just run through them, perhaps just open up for the panel. One of them is around about business travel national. Certainly international will be muted in 2021 and uncertain in 22. So how do we market Liverpool and the Liverpool City region to attract the staycation visitors 21, 22? Chris?
Well, I'll give you. I mean, from a Liverpool perspective, I think there's no doubt that our audience is initially going to be very much domestic, and we've got to entice as many domestic visitors. That's going to be really important for us. I don't see the international market developing really back until 22 in any great extent. So, and of course, one of the big problems that's been caused here is that For those wanting to plan for large-scale conferences, large-scale events, there isn't enough confidence at the moment for people to do that at scale. So that's going to take a bit of time to get back until people begin to, and they need lead-in time for that. So you started to see that very much. We've got a very big order book at ACC. Claire's got some brilliant ideas around large-scale events, but there's a timing issue here about when there's a confidence factor you could bring those in, because they cost a lot of resource and time to put in place. So I think it's probably going to be 22 before we really start seeing that in any great shape. So I think it's really important to understand that. I think, as Claire was saying earlier, this is going to be a slow return. We're not going to go suddenly back to February where we were before COVID. It's going to take a bit of time for us to build. So the domestic audience, the staycation market, really key areas for us to develop. And we're looking at opportunities in that space. We've created a very good partnership arrangement, with example with Belfast as a joint city break between Belfast coming to Liverpool, Liverpool going to Belfast. We've got that ready to launch when both cities are in a place to do it. And it's those type of partnerships I think will get us forward. But domestic first for me, as far as our audience is concerned.
And the question just following on from that as well is really about, yes, we know that we have the ACC, which is, and the ECL, the whole of that campus, which is an amazing, really amazing opportunity that we have here in Liverpool with the conferences that we get. But also we've got right across the city and the city region, those events spaces where we host weddings, smaller business events. And again, we know the weddings are restricted to 15 people if you want to get married, but then it's clearly you can't have a reception or a do, as we say here in Liverpool. So again, it's when will that be able to open? And that follows on very much the same, that we need to get, obviously we need to get the COVID under control, vaccines in place, and hopefully we'll be able to open that up. But one of the unique things about Liverpool is that we're home not just to national football teams, we're home to the league champions at the moment, but we're also home to international events. And we have one of the world's leading horse racing events coming up fast in April. What do we think will happen with our Grand National in April? And also the international events we had, Rugby League World Cup that was coming to Liverpool. And hopefully we'll get back into Premier League. Nobody more than me wants to get back into Goodison Park, apart from the Liverpool supporters.
I don't know, maybe Claire, do you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as everyone else. I know as much as everyone else around this. I think the interesting thing, one of the interesting things, aside from the vaccine, is around mass testing. And how the next stage on how you could start to think, and I know a lot of events organisations are starting to think about how you could do mass testing to get people in and out of events. Huge complications around that. For 20 minutes, where do you store people? Where do you keep people so they know whether they've got a positive or a negative test? So I think testing actually may be one of the ways where the government and nationally we start to look at this, and that's why it's really exciting for Liverpool being this testing. Doing this mass testing at this moment in time, because if there are trials to be run, we'll have our hands up first to say, trial things here. Let's try and get that part of the economy moving, because the football teams bring a huge amount into the city, both people, but also kind of the economic benefit of it. The Aintree, it's a global. I mean, it's a truly global event. So whatever we can do to kind of get those up and running in whatever format we can, of course we'll do. But that's why, I think Joe was expected, that the Mayor of Liverpool was so keen to kind of get this mass testing pilot here, so that the next stages of that we can look at in a really kind of active and creative way.
And I think I'd add to that as well. Don't forget, we're not starting from scratch. Over the summer, when we thought we were through COVID and we weren't going to have a second wave, we did a massive amount of piloting and working with Public Health England to look at how we could safely reopen conference, banqueting, events, functions, and so that we'd be able to pick that all up and overlay it with the mass testing to get it reopened. So I think the thing that will hold us back is the lead time for the big events, but I'm confident that we can start to get some smaller scale events going early in the new year.
Thanks, Kate. And of course, we look forward to the summer when we can get the international tennis tournament back in Egbert, and we really look forward to that in the summer. All of us are looking forward to next year. But Again, this hour goes very quickly. Thank you all for your contributions today. Thank you, Lynn and Claire. Really looking forward to that, and I'll get my application in to be an extra on Batman 2. Thank you, Kate, for all that you do. Thank you for joining us today, but keep up the good work. More power to you, as we say from Liverpool. Anything we can do to support you, anything, just call, you know where we are. And indeed, thank you, Paul. Again, great to have you on board, and thank you for all of you coming to come and spend your lunchtime with us. We look forward to seeing you in December. Quite what December will look like for us in terms of our event, but we will have something on it. Maybe we'll send mince pies around to everybody from the art school and party hats. We'll plan something for our December social. But thank you again for being with us. Any questions, any points you have, please do send them in. Send them into the BID Company, or indeed to Culture Liverpool or Liverpool Hospitality. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. And one final point, if you haven't been tested yet and you're in Liverpool, why haven't you been tested? And if you've been tested, go back and be tested again and keep getting tested. The quicker we sort this out, the quicker we'll all be back to normal, and look forward to seeing you all in the flesh at some form in 2021. So thank you all for today. Thanks and goodbye.
Thank you.